Hello, welcome to the Sound of Science, the place where we deconstruct unscientific bogus and silly scams. Let's go get them. Hello, my fellow critical thinkers. Thank you for watching. Today, I stumbled upon this video by Christian apologist Brian Holdsworth titled Lies You Have Been Taught About Christianity. Oh yes, Brian, that's a very good idea. Let's discuss the most blatant lies about Christianity. Let me first give you what I think are the most outrageous lies about Christianity, and then I will gladly listen if you got some more lies to add. Finally, Brian addresses a useful topic that's very nice. So there are indeed many blatant lies that I think are being told about Christianity over and over again. First one, of course, is the claim that a God exists. You know, Christians are repeating that claim over and over again. A God exists, God this, God that. While they know that there is no sufficient evidence to prove that claim, the worst part is that millions of people lie about this. It's a bit like claiming, Santa exists, the Tooth Fairy exists, Dracula exists, while at the same time knowing there is no sufficient evidence to support those claims. That is kind of lying, isn't it? While there are so many lies about Christianity, this seems like the most obvious one, claiming there is a God every day over and over again, while knowing there is no sufficient evidence to prove that this God exists. But I've got more. For example, the blatant lie that the Christian God is a loving God, while the Bible clearly shows he is an extremely violent and hateful madman. For example, the Genesis chapter describes how the God character slowly and deliberately drowned the entire world population in a planned and systematic manner, just because some people did something that the God character was angry about. So then he decided to kill everyone, including the babies and children, who never did any harm to anyone. So yes, the lie that the Christian God is a loving God is one of the most blatant lies about Christianity. And there is so much more. For example, the blatant lie that God sacrificed his own son, which of course is nonsense. You can even read it in the Bible that this is a lie. The Jesus character was alive again in 3 days. And God is all-knowing, so he knew in advance that Jesus would be alive again in 3 days. So claiming that you sacrificed your own son, while at the same time knowing that you yourself would resurrect him again within 3 days, of course, is another blatant lie about Christianity. But Brian, I'm really interested to hear which lies about Christianity you want to share with us, so please go ahead.
Possibly the most pervasive misconception about the Christian faith is that it's somehow antithetical or in opposition to reason, especially scientific reason.
Wait, Brian, you promised us to discuss lies about Christianity, but what you're saying now is not a lie about Christianity, it's a truth about Christianity. Christianity totally contradicts science. One of the main fundamental principles of science is that we determine what is true based upon evidence that proves claims. And the main claim of Christianity is that a God exists, but no Christian ever provided sufficient evidence that a God exists. So if Christianity keeps repeating the claim that a God exists while there is no evidence to support that claim, then Christianity totally contradicts the main principle of the scientific method. So now I really start wondering, Brian, if you know the difference between truth and lies. But let's listen to what else you've got to say.
Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, William of Ockham, Nicholas of Cusa, and Nicholas Copernicus made such huge, unprecedented strides in observational and empirical sciences that they are rightly credited with being the forefathers of the physical sciences. They were also members of the clerical class.
Wait, Brian, this is really getting awkward now. You try to demonstrate that Christianity goes hand in hand with science by listing individual scientists who were also Christians. Brian, you don't see how that is a very dangerous argument. if I now would produce a list of Christians who were convicted offenders of whatever crimes, would I then prove that Christianity goes hand in hand with crime? Because that is where your argument will lead to. Brian, you're always so confused. You want to prove something and then you demonstrate the exact opposite. But let's give you another chance.
They aren't alone. Countless bishops and priests were polymaths who dedicated heroic efforts to prayer and theology, obviously.
Brian, how can praying be heroic in any form or any way? Yeah, let's sit down, do nothing, and wish for something to happen. Why would anyone be a hero for doing such a pretty lazy thing?
But also to natural philosophy and fields of study that we now categorize as scientific. There's also that minor detail that the Catholic Church established the first universities at her own great expense. Were it not for the Church's patronage, there would have been no universities, and without universities, we never would have arrived at systems of thought that would lead to the scientific method.
Oh, Brian, apart from the fact that the basics of the scientific method were established centuries before Christianity even existed, you are again confused on many levels. You seem to think that something special is going on, when in medieval Europe the first universities were established by the Church, and that a majority of the known scientists in those days were Christians. Brian, everyone was a Christian back then. You know why? Because the Catholic Church ruled society and was often forcing its will upon the people with violence. People were cast out of their communities for not following the Christian belief, and that is if they were lucky. Others who refused to worship the Christian God were simply burned at the stake by the Catholic Church. In medieval Europe, it didn't pay to resist Christianity. It could cost you your life. So, obviously, everyone in medieval Europe subscribed to the Christian cult. Everyone, be it soldiers, farmers, criminals, and also scientists, were Christians. And if you somehow think that this is some amazing feature that proves how Christianity and science go hand in hand, you must also believe that communism goes hand in hand with prosperity, because all the rich people in the Soviet Union were communists.
What about Galileo? Yes, well, Galileo could be one of the items on my list of popular lies most people believe. Most people think Galileo was tortured, imprisoned, and executed for teaching heliocentrism. The fact is, he was neither tortured nor imprisoned, and he definitely wasn't executed.
What? Now you're really getting very close to blatant lies again, Brian. You forget to mention that Galileo was sentenced to house arrest for 9 years by the Inquisition, and he was threatened with torture because he said the sun was the center of our solar system, which turned out to be true. But the Catholic Church wouldn't have it, because that truth contradicted with that despicable Bible book. The treatment of Galileo by the Catholic Church is one of the disgraces of Christian history, and you, Brian, pretending it's not much of a big deal is pretty disgusting.
The Inquisition.
Brian, I thought you'd gone far enough now with your ideas, of which some I think are pretty despicable, but I really fear that this is the part where you're going to defend the Inquisition. Please, don't tell me you're going to defend the Inquisition. The Inquisition was basically the Catholic Church's secret police, who tracked down, prosecuted, and killed anyone who was considered to be a threat to the Catholic Church. They are one of the most infamous institutions of European history. Don't tell me you're going to attempt to find some kind of nuance in the horrific and disgusting suffering that the Inquisition has caused to thousands of people.
Some people would pretend to adhere to the Christian religion while actively undermining it or practicing something contrary behind closed doors.
Yes, of course, because if you were openly worshipping another god than the Christian God, or if you were not obeying to the commands of the Catholic Church, you would be prosecuted. That was the whole point of the Inquisition. So, of course, people kept quiet about their true identity, or they could lose their lives. And Brian, you're now criticizing people who had to hide their own identity because they otherwise would have been violently corrected by the ruling dictatorship. You're now blaming the victims instead of the criminals. Why, Brian? Because that dictatorial regime is your own Catholic Church.
To be a heretic, which is to be someone who professes Christianity but does not adhere to the communal faith and practice of the church. It meant that you were someone who was jeopardizing the bonds of your community, bonds based in religion. And it was civil authorities who had the responsibility of meting out judicial punishment for crimes of which heresy was one.
Brian, this is where you almost make me puke. You present the supposed crime of heresy as some kind of logical and reasonable concept. Brian, in medieval Europe, I would have been a heretic because I'm an atheist. I do not believe that your silly and evil God exists. Would I be open about that in a culture in which I would be prosecuted for that? Of course not. In order to stay alive, I would be forced to pretend as if I'm some kind of Christian. Brian, by presenting heresy as a crime, without rejecting that principle, you give your viewers the impression that not believing in your God should be punishable. You make the world an unsafer place for everyone who does not believe in your God. I'm totally sick of your ideas, so it's time for me to stop this video. Jeez, this is astounding. If you agree with me that freedom of thought is one of the most precious values, if you agree with me that we should have the freedom to not worship any god, then perhaps subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.